probably one of the most exciting transitions out there is the transition towards personalised medicine. And essentially what we mean by that is if you were to wind the clock back sort of 10 or 15 years ago, we were certainly living in the era of what we will call the blockbuster drugs. In other words, there would be a big drug which would be launched by the major pharmaceutical companies, the Mercks, the Eli Lillys, which would sell into the tens of millions of or tens of billions of dollars of revenue. We believe we're entering the era of personalised medicine, and really what's enabled this transition towards personalised medicine has been that the cost of mapping the human genome, in other words, getting our own DNA records, has shrunk from several $100,000 15 years ago to several hundred today. You can send off your saliva sample in the post and get your sort of DNA history as a result of that. And what that has done is it's really revolutionised the way that drugs are getting discovered these days. So one of our key pockets of exposure that we have is to really kind of the personalised medical value chain in terms of kind of some of the companies that enable more efficacious discovery of promising drug molecules, or the manufacture of what are called biomolecular drugs, which is kind of the way that drugs are increasingly getting made away from sort of the chemical-based compounds of paracetamol and aspirin. So that's been one really interesting area. The second area, which I think has been really interesting as well, is kind of the shift towards electric vehicles, which has happened, as I mentioned, sort of far quicker than we could have expected. And we have some really interesting exposures in there. Companies that are involved really in two key technologies within the car. The first is green technology, so it's essentially electric vehicle architecture. And the second one is safe technology. And what this means these days is companies that make autonomous driving type solutions. And there's a huge potential to see road deaths decline substantially as a result of that. So that's one of the key areas we look at. And I guess in terms of Impax's approach to capturing opportunities like the sustainable transition towards electric cars, we aren't so interested in the car manufacturers themselves, because essentially it's a very rapidly evolving industry, and we don't frankly know which car company is going to dominate the electric vehicle paradigm in 5 or 10 years' time. But we do know that demand for electric vehicle architecture and autonomous driving solutions will go up over that period. And so we think that investing in those companies that provide some of those solutions to, whichever car company dominates that era is probably the most prudent approach. Probably a good one to highlight actually is within that auto component space, which is a really interesting trend at the moment. The company that we have exposure to within that space is called Aptiv. It's a US company which has really sort of evolved over the last 10 or 20 years, where 10 or 20 years ago it was a maker of components for combustion engine cars, and now it has really pivoted its business towards kind of some of those sort of future car type trends. I mentioned the green trends, I mentioned the safe trends, and also the connected trends. And what I mean by that is that essentially kind of the car is becoming the next connected consumer device. You see how Apple are increasingly interested in that area. So this company, Aptiv, provides solutions to all of those different areas. It's got incredibly high barriers to entry because, frankly, making autonomous driving solutions is incredibly complicated, and it's still under fast evolution at the moment. But why this is such an interesting area is essentially this company increasingly provides more content per vehicle as the years go by. So if we have the global auto market, which is probably this year not going to grow because of the European production issues as a result of the Ukraine war situation, Aptiv will probably grow 8 to 10% of that consistently over the next few years. So this kind of very consistent growth above market is incredibly attractive for us. So we think those kind of stocks are sort of really well placed for the longer term.